Welcome, farewell fans. I'm your host, MNG, and I have Karl Smith with me here today. Welcome to another episode. We are talking about military kids, and we're talking about the parents of these military kids and the effect that goes behind it. Now, I'm going to be honest. I wanted my son to go to the military. I thought it would be a great path. Now, y'all heard me talk about all the options I gave my son when it came to his choices in life. I gave him 4 choices and he chose to go to trade school. Now, I have Karl Smith here, and we're going to talk about what it takes to be a military parent. And you have your kids in the military and some of the current concerns that take you through those steps. Because I'm pretty sure that there is some questions that people may have to say, my kid is thinking about going to the military, and what does that involve? Like, what is it? The inspiration that goes behind it. So, Karl, give us an idea of your mentality when your kids was like, you know what, I want to go to the military.
Yeah, sure. So total shock for me. I don't have a military background, nor does their mother. Both their grandfathers served during the Korean War, but not exactly something that either one of them would have said, "Hey, you should do this." So my son is the oldest, and I would say around his sophomore year, he was a Boy Scout, and we camped at all the military academies over the course of his 4 years, right?
Okay.
So and I think something just caught his eye when we were in Annapolis and we were touring the yard, which is what they call the campus at the Naval Academy. And he didn't say it outright, but you could tell that it had an impact on him. And when he started looking at colleges, and that's, he definitely wanted to go the college route, it was either going to be the Naval Academy or what we call civilian college. He didn't want to do ROTC. He didn't look at West Point. He didn't look at Air Force Academy, even though he had been to both and loved both campuses. There's something about the Naval Academy that at one point, I can remember very clearly him writing, this is when he was still using Twitter. And you have kids, that their social media, they change their social media like we change our socks, right? So for a hot minute, he was using Twitter. And I remember taking a screenshot of this thing. As never before have I wanted to be a part of something bigger than myself. Go Navy. And that's when he got serious about the application process for the Naval Academy. And he really got locked into it. It was applying for the military academies, as I've been through this twice, it's not for the faint of heart. It is a very arduous process. And that's why the acceptance rates are as low as they are. But he had it in his head that that's what he wanted to do. He was lucky enough, quite frankly, to get an appointment, and he accepted it. And while he was there, my daughter had become, connected with some of the veterans in our church, and really had a heart for them. She was seeing the number of homeless veterans you're seeing, and the veterans who are struggling to make ends meet, and sadly the suicide rates of these veterans, and it really touched her. And she saw the struggles that my son had at the academy, but also the opportunities. And at some point, and my daughter's adopted, so she had there's other things she had going in her head was, look what this country has done for me. I've gotten all these opportunities. So you put all those together, and she said, not only do I want to go to military, or not only do I want to be a military officer, I want to do it by the same path as my brother. I want to go to a military academy. So unlike her brother, she applied to Air Force, West Point, Annapolis, and the Coast Guard Academy. And every college she looked at had to have an ROTC program, and she applied for ROTC. So she was dead set on that military officer path, unlike my son, who's like, it's going to be one or the other. But I do think it takes, your child has to have kind of a servant's heart. They have to have that mindset, excuse me, they have to have a mindset of somebody who wants to serve and lead. And I think once they get to that point, you realize that you will not own as much of your future as you'd like, which for a lot of teenagers is a tough thing to come to grips with, right? I mean, you're living with mom and dad, riding you like a dog for the last 18 years, and you're finally going to get some freedom, and you're giving up all that for the opportunity to serve your country.
Wow. That's amazing. So your son just wanted to go to the Navy, and then your daughter was inspired by the veterans that she's seen there, and what they were going through, the homeless, the suicide rate. And that's some powerful things.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think that a lot of people understand that, when you go to the military, yeah, you're giving up, as you stated,
Mm-hmm.
your choices in life, for the most part.
Oh, for sure. And so one of the things we find that your kid goes into one of these military academies, people say, "Oh, your kid's getting a free education." Well, you know as well as I do that there's nothing you get for free in this life, right?
Right.
Right. So yes, do they have to pay tuition? No, they don't. But do they have to carry more hours than almost any kid will ever take? Yes. I mean, when I was in college, I was taking 15, 16 hours a semester. The least amount my son took was 20 something, like 22 hours in a semester. Oh, by the
Wow.
way, they have military duty. So my son would say, look, there's sometimes when you're on watch from 12 to 2 and you're not studying, you're not doing anything. You're literally sitting there staring down the corridor. You're on watch. Um, you're restricted to the base as a plebe, which is a freshman for the Naval Academy. You're not leaving the base, period. Not for the maybe a handful of times a semester. You certainly don't leave during the week. You are in this military installation for all those times. Your summers are broken up into 3 or 4 blocks, and you get one of those blocks to yourself. The other ones are military training. So yeah, you give up quite a bit, but then there's the opportunities, right? So
Okay.
what I say to my friends who ask about, I say there's 2 great things about your kid going to military academy. One, yeah, you don't have to pay tuition, which is not a bad deal. The other is, your kid's going to have a good job for at least 5 years after school. They're not going to be living in your basement playing, PS5.
Right.
So I think that's they start to see the trade-offs. And what my daughter was seeing was the opportunities. So my son had his first summer after his plebe year. One of his trainings, his professional training, was to go to the National Outdoor Leadership School, and he did a 30-day backpacking trip in the backcountry of Alaska, where they lived out of their backpack for 30 days. He had an internship with Microsoft with their cyber operations team, the Ghostbusters. So he was out in Seattle for a month, flying around working on cyber issues. And I think she saw that, and then the future opportunities, and said, "Yeah, you can see that's the trade-off, right? That you're giving up those." You're giving up those freedoms to say, yes, I'm going to go here, do that, do the other thing. But in return for your service, you're having these opportunities that, frankly, other people they're just not going to have. They're just not going to have those opportunities.
And the ability, and just like you stated, that opportunity to see the world, see other
Mm-hmm.
cultures, see other locations,
Mm-hmm.
something that you wouldn't get in other positions that may require 20-25% travel, or or 50%
Right.
travel, and it's primarily all business or business conferences, and you don't get
Mm-hmm.
to really explore and see the cities that you may explore and see if you were, had this opportunity.
Right, right. So he's a civilian. So I worked for a global trade association, and twice had the opportunity to go to South Africa. And the one time I was on the ground for 36 hours. So I literally spent, if I wasn't in a conference room, I was driving to a conference room. I was going back to the airport. So not a lot to see. That was just the way the trip was. So my son was assigned to the submarine community and did 3 deployments aboard the USS Florida. During that time, now he'll tell you how difficult it was, and I'm not going to lie, it sounds like it was really difficult. That being said, he was in Guam for a couple weeks. So not a lot of people get to the South Pacific. He was. He was in Norway. He got to see the aurora borealis, right off of his boat. He's been to Gibraltar, the Rock of Gibraltar. He's been to Greece, and done all these things that you're only going to get an opportunity to do. Very few people get that opportunity to do, for sure. So, I know my daughter is hoping maybe at some point she could get, to a base in Japan, which I know we actually, this past weekend, we did a little video chat with one of my son's buddies who's been based in Japan for the last 3 years. And yeah, I'm loving it. It's, fantastic, different culture, different foods. I'm literally living it. So you're going to get experiences that other people can't even fathom. I tell my son, yeah, it's difficult, agreed, but you spent 30 days inside the Arctic Circle. Not a lot of people are going to be able to say that. You've been aboard a nuclear powered submarine. His first job as a junior officer was to run the nuclear reactor. I don't know of many 23-year-olds that can say that's my job. So
I don't think they'll want any 23-year-old. It's
Yeah,
just like, yeah, we want you to go ahead and control this for this 8-hour shift. Make sure nothing goes wrong.
right, right.
Like, well, I'm an intern. I just got here.
Yeah.
You're gonna do good here. Just
Yeah.
go ahead.
I don't even know where the restroom's at. I don't think I'm ready to run this thing yet. Right. So yeah, I think that and I would say too, important I think for parents to realize that you kind of exposed your kids to the military option, that the enlisted route is a good route. And just because you're joining the military doesn't mean they're going to put a gun in your hand and put you on the front lines. Every job you can imagine exists in the military. So my daughter, when she commissions from the Air Force Academy, she'll have a degree in management, but she'll commission as a lieutenant, and her job is going to be acquisitions. I mean, her job is basically to run purchasing at a military base. So, there are people who are going to be mechanics. There are people who are going to be cooks. There's people who do force support, which is basically they help make sure the bases run efficiently. All those jobs exist. In fact, our former senior pastor went into the Marines, did 6 weeks of basics, and ended up in the Marine band. So, that was his job, was to play the euphonium for the U.S. Marine band. So we have one of my professors here, a professor on our faculty here at Bowling Green State University, Jose Cardenas, who I mentioned actually is what featured in my book, was in the Air Force, retired as an Air Force major, and his whole job was doing video, where he's a videographer by trade. And he was, in the public affairs, sector, public information officer type of thing. And he traveled around the world, shooting video, creating news packages for the public. So, I know it's, some kids think military and think, oh, I got to be in a uniform and do it. I'm told, yes. And, you can get paid to learn these skills that you want to do everywhere else. So Jose served in the Air Force, but he also shot news down in Los Angeles for a couple of years. He also did a zombie movie here in Ohio. So there's those skills you can pick up, and then you can, take them anywhere. My son will be now, he's finishing up his time on the Florida. He'll be doing what's called NUPOC, which is a recruiting, and he'll be recruiting kids in high school and college to get into the nuclear pipeline. And he's like, Dad, he goes, these people they're going to go to school. The Navy's going to pay for their school. Oh, and they're going to, by the way, they're going to get paid while they go to school as a E6, an enlisted level 6, which is not bad money. So you're getting paid to go to school, and they're paying for your school with a guaranteed job that's going to pay you good money when you get out. All in all, that's, I don't know about you, but when I was about to graduate from college, my biggest panic was, can I find a job? Not let alone a good job, just a job where they pay in American currency doing something I think is interesting.
I think that still is a panic today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And just to highlight that a little bit, you have people out here with 2 or 3 degrees
Mm-hmm.
that can't find a job or a suitable job paying at all.
Yep.
And it's amazing that, and I know people that has went into the military, that are now currently veterans that are out and about and living a civilian life,
Mm-hmm.
and they're okay.
Yeah.
They're fine. They're doing well.
Mm-hmm.
They went in. They did their time. They came out with a skill set, and some of them are either business owners developing their business, entrepreneurs, and in different walks of life.
Yeah, there's no one path, right? So I think, again, that's one of those things that consider, that people you don't have to go in forever, whatever time you want to, 5 years, 7 years, whatever that is. I will say one thing I will say about people kind of my age cohort, when my kids were embarking on this journey, is most of the veterans would say to me, I should have stayed in longer. They look back and go, man, they miss the opportunities. They miss the way the military would take care of them. So and again, to your point, you get out. And so I said to my son, if you leave, he does his short duty for 3 years, you're going to be 28 years old. You're going to have like 6 years of significant leadership experience in a high stress environment. You're going to have a top secret clearance. You're going to understand basically project management at a level that most people will never have to deal with.
Right.
All of those things, and you're not even going to be 30 yet. So, and then you come out, and you'll find that there are a lot of employers who will be looking for someone like that. Okay, here's a submariner, and he's got top secret clearance, and he understands this and understands that. They're looking for people like that, and that
Yeah.
just gives you a leg up. I have a friend who served in the Army as I think it was lieutenant colonel, where Mitch finally got out of the Army. But then you get your retirement from the military. He's like, now he found another. He's doing what is he doing? He's the truant officer basically for a school district. He says, great. I get to work with kids. I get to work with families. It's a good gig, and they find their path. But you get these. To your point, you're getting these skills and these experiences that translate really well into the civilian world. And again, this goes back to what people think it is. They think, I'm going to be carrying a gun, I'm going to be in a foxhole or in a bunker. That's not it. You're going to come out with some real skill sets that employers are going to say, I know this person can handle pressure. That's my son was, I think it was when he was up in Norway. He often will say to me, we were having a party and we had some uninvited guests. That's his code for the bad guys were in the area. And he said, we're leaving, and there was someone who really shouldn't have been there. And the XO put them in a position and said, okay, if this doesn't work, nobody's coming. We're on our own. And I'm thinking, geez, he's got these junior officers who are in their mid-20s, and they experienced that. And you know what? They worked the problem. They did the job. And those are stories that these kids experience. They have these experiences. They have these stories they live through, and that translates so well into how are you going to rattle this kid, this 28, 30-year-old person? How are you going to rattle this person when with I don't know, a contract negotiation when they've been staring down Russian or Chinese warships or that kind of thing? It's those that all translates, I think, really, really well.
I think so as well. And it seems like there is a lot of stories, a lot of action, some action that was going on in there. So I know we had when you sent me over your bio and everything, you had talked about that, you started a blog about your experiences as a military father. So help the audience understand, like, why did you start this blog and how did it help you connect with other families?
Sure. So when my son entered the Naval Academy, as I said, I had no military background. I didn't really understand what the academies were about, and it was incredibly stressful. I mean, point blank. And the only way I knew how to deal with that was to write about it. As the father, it's kind of my job to keep steady as she goes at home. So that's kind of what I'm doing. I can't really turn to anybody else to help me through that. So I just started blogging. Really, it was just cathartic. I just wanted to write and get it out of my system. This is the stress I'm feeling. These are things I'm seeing. And as I did that, and I started, it was called, it's still active, mykidthemid.com. I started writing about this, and parents started to respond to it. I started getting messages on Facebook. I started getting emails, parents saying, gee, this is, I'm having a similar experience, or can you tell me about this? So what I did as I was writing about this is I would be very clear on the good and bad.
Okay.
Because it is a roller coaster. A lot of people, I come to understand, believe that if your son or daughter gets an appointment to one of our military academies, that they have punched the golden ticket. It's nothing but unicorns and rainbows from here out there. It's like 4 years in Disney World. That is not the case. It's the training is grueling, especially the first year, but the restrictions continue for the entire 4 years they're there. And things happen at such an incredible pace that you often don't have time to process or absorb what's just happened before the next thing is coming, good or bad. Could be something fantastic. You're like, okay, I can't be upset because this really good thing is happening now. So I wrote about that very openly and as honestly as I could. And I had Grant Vermeer, who runs Academy Insider, which is an inside look at the Naval Academy, has used the phrase radical transparency. And that's kind of what I tried to bring to the table, was to say to people, the phrase I've used over and over again is, your experience is the right experience. Because you've been on Facebook, people who look more like you and I than our kids, we've been on Facebook, right?
Right.
And what Facebook is, it's a highlight reel.
It is.
So, right, nobody's saying I had a bad day, I cut myself on a can opener. That's not what gets. It's look at
Not
this great
not
5-star meal I had, right? So I started reading on these private Facebook groups for the Naval Academy, and everybody's just like, "This is the greatest thing of all time." And I'm thinking, maybe I'm in the wrong place, because that's not what it is for me. Like, I'm worried about my son. He sent me this message, but as I wrote about that, more people started saying that's, we were seeing that too. So I keep saying your experience is the right experience. If you're stressed about something, it's okay. It's not always going to be like that, but it's okay to feel stress. It's okay to be really happy for something. We just had at the Air Force Academy, where my daughter is in her final year, what they call them job drops, which is at the beginning of the year, the senior cadets will say, here are the jobs I want. I want to be a pilot. I want to be in missiles. I want to be in logistics. I want to be in acquisitions. And they list their jobs. And then job drops is when they find out what their job is. Now, your Facebook feed, if you're on one of these Air Force Academy pages, is flooded with, "Oh, this has always been my son's dream. He always wanted to be a pilot. Now he's going to be a pilot. My daughter wanted to go Space Force. She's got Space Force. My so-and-so wanted to do this." What you don't see is the 20 or 30% who didn't get that. So when I get a message from somebody saying, "Yeah, my daughter got her 8th choice," and you're like, wow, that, you have to let that sink in for a minute, right?
Ooh.
Yeah, neither of my kids got their first choice. My son wanted to go cyber. He majored in cyber operations. He did an internship in cyber operations. He is as big a computer geek as you're ever going to get. That's what he wanted. But the Navy said, you look over my shoulder, you need to be on a submarine. And that's what he got. So what happened, this is one thing I've always kind of, I don't say taught my kids, but the way I've guided my kids is, when something bad happens or disappointing, you get 24 hours to feel sorry for yourself. And once that clock strikes 0, you have to decide how to make the best of it.
Right.
So both kids did that. My son, I'm on the Navy Facebook page. Everyone's about their job drops. I don't hear from my son for a good 24 hours. He's like, "I'm going subs." I'm like, "Oh, okay." And, he's never been excited about it. I'm not going to lie to you, but you know what? He's like, "Okay, this is the job. I got to do the job, got to do the training. I do the best of my ability," and all of that. So, I wrote about those kind of things. He struggled trying to make the sprint football team at Navy. And that was a struggle. And I wrote about that. So one of the things that's led to is connecting with some parents who've been incredibly open. Sometimes it's a private conversation, but I had one, I read on Facebook, one mom said, "My son voluntarily left the Naval Academy." And I reached out to her and I said, a lot of people don't realize this kind of thing happens. Would you mind sharing the story? And she did. And it wasn't much writing on my part. I really took a lot of what she wrote and put it up almost verbatim. And to this day, now this blog's been around, so I want to say 2018, six plus years later, people are still finding that blog post and they're reading it because it was honest and it was true. And she explained, why he decided to leave and the process behind it and what happened afterwards. And I think that kind of thing really resonates with people when you're able to be really authentic and show that you understand where they are, what they're going through. And it's allowed me to connect with just an amazing array of people. And the same thing when my daughter Kate went to the Air Force Academy, I started mykidthecadet.com. And same thing happened. People from the Air Force Academy have reached out for the same types of reasons. I didn't realize it was going to be this hard. I'm not used to not being able to talk to my kid every day. This is a little thing. Oftentimes when your son or daughter's at a military academy and something not great happens or they're really stressed, they will call and they will dump on you. I mean, you will just get this bleh of negative energy. And as a parent, a phrase is like, you're the emotional dumpster, because they can't go to their classmates because they're all up to here in it. They can't go to the senior, the older cadets because they're busy, and the officers around them are just going to say tough luck. So they need somewhere to come with this stuff. So they come to you. So you take that on. But here's what you learn. That's just a moment in time for them.
Right.
They've done that. They've dumped it and they're on to the next thing. Meanwhile, you're stuck with all this, negative energy you've got to figure out. But that's so your role as a parent changes. You become this. My kids still ask me for advice, but sometimes they just need to dump. They have nowhere else to go with it. And I get that from parents like, oh, my daughter called me and said, yada, yada, such and such, so-and-so, and it's awful. And I'm like, okay, give it a little time. And then 99 times out of 100, I'll get a note back and say, yeah, I talked to her. She's fine now. She just said, they're going out for ice cream or something. So that those blogs have kind of helped me, I think, give people a sounding board and a way to kind of share and just let people know that your experience is okay. If you're, it doesn't, you're not in a perfect situation, and that's okay.
And then I think that's great. And I think that's what a lot of people need. They need those communities,
Mm-hmm.
and they need to be able to sound off the good and the bad. And it sounds like that not only, well, for the Facebook group, a lot of people just signing off the great things.
Right.
And then with your blog, it offers some transparency
mm-hmm.
on some of the things that are not highlighted as much when it comes to having those conversations.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, and I can appreciate that so much more, because even as a father, in my situation, being that I raised my son by myself, and I know that there's a community out there
mm-hmm.
of fathers that's not having that conversation, that's not in that situation, or they want to be in that position where they can have custody of their kids, depending on what their situation is,
mm-hmm.
but they just don't know how to go about it, and they don't have that community. They don't have somebody that is experienced around them to say, okay, well, this is how you should go about it, without having to pay money to get the advice. Your blog has provided a platform, whether it has, and it's a blog, so I'm pretty sure it's free to read.
Yes,
So,
it is, absolutely. Yeah.
It provided a platform for everybody to resonate with your experience and contribute their own experiences as well, and have that transparency conversation. I think a lot of people are afraid of having those transparency conversations because they're, as people are on Facebook, comparing their life to somebody else's life to say, oh, well, their kid got there first, but my kid got their second.
Right.
Why did they get their first? What benefited them to get the first, and mine to get the second? And
yeah, you hit it right on the head that so many people are comparing, right? And I think that, to your point, I think one of the reasons that as parents, especially, we don't either have that community or seek out that community is it may look like our kid is a failure or we're a failure because of it. Like my kid didn't get his first choice, ergo they're not as good as your kid, or I'm not as good a parent because I didn't help them get, I didn't raise them in a way that they got their first choice. And I think that's, I don't know, I think that having a supportive community who doesn't judge you and merely wants to help you and be a support for you in whatever that means, I think that's, to me, that's the way it should be. And I found that at both of our military academies, and it goes, I'll level that up one more. So there's a thing that we have with the military. It's called the Academy Travel Network, and this is a strictly volunteer thing. 3 moms who have kids in multiple academies put this together, and people. It's an active spreadsheet. It's a Google sheet, and it has people who basically offer up their homes. If you need to go somewhere and stay somewhere, they'll offer their home up for free. You can come and just stay. How do I know about this? Well, my son's trip to the National Outdoor Leadership School was in Anchorage, Alaska. That's where he landed. I'm thinking, okay, my kid's going to land there. Well, what the heck does he do for the day and a half until he? So I'm thinking, well, I guess he's going to have to find a hotel. Turns out, reach out, and there's a Navy mom up in Anchorage. She says, what do you need? I said, here are the things I need. Tell me what you can do to help. I need to get him picked up at the airport. I need a place for him to stay until he gets there. I need someone to get him to the drop-off. I need someone to pick him up and so on. And she says, I got it. I said, well, which one can you help with? She goes, oh, no, I've got all of it. And he goes, I get treated like a king. They picked me up at the airport. I had my own room. They're feeding me. They showed me around Anchorage. When my daughter and I were going out to we took a vacation 2 summers ago to the Dakotas. She was in Rapid City. She had just finished. She was doing training at Ellsworth Air Force Base, but I wouldn't get out till 2 days after she was done. I go to the Academy Travel Network, and there, sure enough, there's a family. They said, "Oh, sure, we'll take care of her." Again, they treat her like their extra daughter for 2 days. Running around the family, going to soccer games. And I don't know of many, if any, universities that have that kind of network where they would just say, "Sure, come stay in our house just because you're affiliated with the school we went to." But because that military family is so tight and the military parents are so tight, they just feel perfectly comfortable saying, "Yeah, we're here to support you in whatever way we can, and if it's giving you a ride to the airport or giving you a place to stay, we'll do that."
That's amazing. That
Mm-hmm.
is a very tight knit community. I think a lot more communities should come together,
Yeah, yeah,
especially a community of strangers. I mean, this is a community of
yeah,
strangers. They're out looking out for other people's kids. That is powerful.
yeah,
That is powerful.
yeah.
So from your blog and from all the conversations with other families that we had, like what was the most common concerns or questions that you would
Hmm.
hear from parents?
The biggest concern I get that I hear consistently from parents is if their child is having thoughts about leaving. That is consider that, or they're trying to work the chain of command. Their child needs medical. They think their child has a medical issue, and they're either going to get they're going to get they're going to get let go. They're going to have to leave the academy because of this, or they're going to miss something, DQ, disqualified. But the parents will most often reach out when their kid's having doubts. That's very consistent, and I've said this before. I know people who have been like, this is something they want to do their entire life, and I guarantee you, even if it's for an hour, it's for a few moments, they had that doubt, like, you know what, I don't know if this is for me. I don't know. Now, my son had that stretch through his first year, probably till October that first year. And a very wise author friend, Susan Weisberg, she wrote a trilogy of books about the Naval Academy through the eyes of a mouse who's going through the Naval Mouse Academy. And Chester, her character, goes through what she calls the dark night of the soul.
Mm.
And everybody has that at the academies because it is so intense. There's so much pressure. It's nonstop. And at one point or another, you have to say to yourself, is this for me? And that's when the parents will reach out. They'll say, oh, my son or daughter, they're not sure. I got this email, I got this text, I got this phone call. And they'll want to talk through it. And, that is it's very common. I mean, my son came up to me after induction day at the Naval Academy. You drop him off and then you get to see him for half an hour after the day is over before they go in. His eyes are red, they're puffy. And I've written about this a dozen times. And he looked me in the eye and said, "I don't know that I can do this." And I'm thinking, man, for the last year and a half, this has been the number one priority. Like, all you've talked about is we're going to get in, we got to do the paperwork, and he got disqualified, and then he had to do, he had to get the word is escaping me, a waiver. He had to get a waiver. He had to go through all these doctor's appointments, and he got in, and all of a sudden, it's like, I don't know that I can do this. And in an honest moment, every cadet or midshipman gets there. They are, I don't know if this is for me. And as a parent, especially at these academies, remember, these tend to be extremely high achieving kids. They're in the top 10% of their class. They're varsity lettermen. They're Eagle Scouts. They're Girl Scout Gold Award winners. All those things. And all of a sudden you're hearing this kid say, "Here's something, I don't know that I can do it." Here's a good story. So my son tried out for the Navy sprint football team. Didn't make it as a first year. Made it second year. Didn't play, of course, but they're playing at West Point, and I was in Philly at the time, so I went up to the game. And they got steamrolled. I mean, I've coached football, and there are some minutes as soon as the opening kickoff says, we're going to get a beating. Let's just take it like men and go home, right?
Yeah.
Well, this was a beating, right? Blocked punt, safety, got steamrolled. So the coach has his players in front of him. He says, "Okay, now who's had a loss like this?" My son shoots up his hand. He said, "Dad," and I looked around, and I was the only one with my hand up. And he said, "I'm thinking, you guys have never gotten beaten before? Like, this is just..." So these are kids who aren't used to failure. Like, they believe that, not that they're indestructible, but they're indestructible. Like, I will achieve whatever I set my mind to. Not always the case. And I wrote about, especially extended in my book, about his journey with football. And I titled that chapter "Patience and Persistence." because that's what it takes sometimes. These kids that they think they've failed in the first time, and it's, dealing with failure is part of growing up. And this is the first time some of them had to deal with that. So I get the parents and they're like, geez, I'm not used to my kid not, well, here, think of this. So I just said, like, most of these kids are in the top 10% of their class, right?
Right.
Do the math. They're all not going to be in the top 10% of their class at the Naval Academy. Someone has to finish last, right?
Right.
So my son was a very good, I stopped paying attention to my kids' grades in middle school because I told him, what's at stake. If you don't want to do well, it's up to you now. So I said, how were their grades at the Naval Academy? He goes, Dad, he goes, that big bell curve? I said, yeah. He goes, I was right in the middle of that fat part of the curve. That's where I was. I'm like, okay, that's where he landed. But most of these kids are used to being number one in their class and getting the gold star. And the parents, I think the parents, as much as the kids, have to kind of get ready to deal with that. So I find that's the long answer to your short question, but that's kind of what I see a lot of the parents reaching out to me and saying, they need help dealing with that.
So one of the things I want to highlight that you said was patience and persistence.
Mm-hmm.
That is huge. I want to put those two words together.
Yeah.
Patience, definitely. Persistence, a lot of people say consistency, but persistence, it sounds more like, keep on pushing through it.
Mm-hmm.
Just stay patient and just keep pushing through it. And eventually you'll overcome whatever is in front of you.
Mm-hmm.
I like that. I really had to stop and just highlight that patience and persistence. Like,
persistence is a very purposely chosen word because I believe persistence is active patience. You can be patient and wait, but being waiting isn't enough sometimes. Being persistent means that you're continuing to push, but you're doing it patiently. You're not losing your focus. You're consistent. You're persistent. But persistence is being patient, not expecting more than you deserve, but you're consistently going after it. And I think that, and especially in this age, we talked about Facebook. This cohort, these kids who are in their 18 to the early 20s, it's a world of instant gratification, right?
Yes.
I want to see a video. Boom, I get to see a video. I want to watch this movie. Bam, I get to see this movie. Everything is right away. So for these young men and women to learn that skill of seeing that goal, establishing a plan to get that goal, and then persistently working towards that goal is something that's a life skill, right? That is something that's only going to serve them. And I don't care if you're a plumber or a nuclear physicist, that persistence, that's what's going to allow you to get where you need to be. I wrote about my son. Again, this sprint football is a big part of this. Is one of my favorite chapters of the book, honestly. So first year didn't play much. Second year worked really hard. Ended up second string. Fine. First game of the season, left tackle gets an injury. All of a sudden he's in. Now my son has been a guard most of his life. Now he's playing tackle. He plays the whole season. They win the championship. They win the Sprint Football League championship. Now here he is. He's earned a varsity letter. He's a starter on a championship team. He's summer workouts. He's feeling it. I'm coming back. I'm a starter. What he finds out when he comes back for his senior year is the coach says, well, really, you're going to be more of a player coach, which is coach speak for I'm benching you. So, he grits his teeth and he keeps working. He's persistent. And, once again, kid gets injured in the first game of the season. And there he is, Johnny on the spot. Because he was patient, because he was persistent, he kept working. He didn't just sit there and say, well, we'll see what happens. So he worked hard. So he was ready for the opportunity and he made it work. And he played, he started the whole year, made it to a championship game, although they lost, great way to capstone his football career. But it only happened because he had learned to be persistent. And I think that's a trait you see a lot. I read enough of things about, because I work with a lot of college students, I try to stay on top of trends with these young graduates and the job situation, which you alluded to earlier, and what they're dealing with. And what they're seeing is a lot of them, they can't make it because they're not used to being told, no, that's not good enough. Do it this way. Or they're not getting the rewards they want fast enough. So I think as parents, if we kind of imbue our children with that idea of being patient and persistent and focused, that's going to serve them so well over the long term. I think you're exactly right. It's such a crucial skill that a lot of people they're frankly just missing.
I agree. I agree. So, in being there for your son and your daughter and providing them with a listening ear
Mhm.
and just that shoulder to lean on when stuff get tough, and as you stated, they could just dump on you. What would be like one or two ways that you could best support your kids to navigate the challenges?
Yeah, good question. So, because there are always going to be those challenges. I think one of the things I've really had to learn when my kids were in high school and then especially in academies is they're you're not there to solve all their problems, and I think that that's a burden as parents we need to lift off of ourselves. Our job is to, I always say, I don't tell my kids what to do. I mostly i mostly ask them to consider things. Well, here's some things I want you to consider for your situation,
Okay.
and try to listen. What is it that they're really like? Are they really taking into consideration these things? Um, and also by having a good ear as a parent, you have to be able to discern when you need to intervene with advice or guidance and when they're just kind of working it through themselves, or you need to give them the rope or the space, or just let the conversation have air so it can kind of keep going and let them figure it out. That's something with the academies we say very often, FIO, figure it out. They have to figure it out because they do. Because when my son is 600 feet deep in a submarine and something goes wrong, he can't look over his shoulder and say, "Dad, what do you think?" He has to be able to figure that out.
Right.
So I think that is the thing as a parent. When your kids are they're grade school and maybe in the middle school, there are sometimes you just have to kind of come around and say, don't put your hand on the hot stove, right? I mean, that's the basics. But to transition ourselves to where we're listening and saying, what do they really need to get to that answer? And try to, kind of, again, paint that picture. My kids have done a bunch of things that I would have said, if they had said point blank, say yes or no, I said, not a chance. And you know what? And they did it. And this is something, I think this is so critical. And this is at the middle school and grade school level. Back to the football story. You have to let your kids fail. You have to let your kids fail.
True. That is a fact.
Right. I mean, if your son grows up never having, you've got him the participation trophy every time he did something, he's going to get out in the real world and something's going to go south and something's not going to go his way. And if they haven't experienced that, they're not going to handle it well. That's so. My both my kids during as they were growing up, grade school, middle school, and high school, there were plenty of failures. And while I don't say I want to celebrate them, I would always say to them afterwards, okay, like look, Nelson Mandela once said, I never lose. I either succeed or I learn. So what did you learn? This thing didn't go your way. What did you learn? What would you do differently? What could you have done differently? Then that gives you a reference point for the next time something is up. Then here's your consideration. Here's something I want you to consider. Remember that one time when this thing didn't go well? What did you say you learned from that? And they go, oh, I said I was going to do this. Okay, I didn't tell you what to do. You told yourself what to do. I merely reminded you.
Right.
So I think those failures on simple things, obviously, you get to these major decisions you don't want, but that's how you prepare them for that. So
Yeah.
I think the parents who are afraid to let their kids not finish first, or who are afraid for their kids not to make the team, or whatever that case may be, I just think that's something, as parents we have to be better at. And again, it goes back to some of the social media thing where you see, their son or daughter, they got first place and they made the team and they did the thing and they did the other and whatever. And you have to stop comparing yourself to that. Like, what is best? What do I believe is best for my child? And how can I help best get them there?
True. That's very true. So thinking about that and thinking about the young people that's considering going into a military career,
Mm-hmm.
what would be your advice to those young people?
I would tell them to investigate all the options. Think about the things that you want to do and then and do the research, find out what the options are. You can straight up enlist, simple enough, and you can try to get the job that you want there. You can go to college and go ROTC. You can go to college, graduate, and then go to officer candidate school. You can apply to the military. There's so many different ways, and it doesn't have to. It doesn't have to be active military. You could go into the reserves. You could go into the National Guard. Don't restrict yourself and think there's only, if I join the military, I'm going to have an M16 in my hand on the front line. Really do the research and look at all the options that are out there, and also look at the benefits, right? So, you're getting paid, yes, but there's you also get a housing allowance, which is tax-free bonus. Look, my son was griping about money his first year. I go, well, he goes, how much am I really making? And I said, let me ask you this. How much do you pay for your health insurance? Well, I don't pay anything. Right. Well, let me tell you what I see at the back of my paycheck every 2 weeks, this big negative number that comes out, right?
Yeah.
So if you, and then you start to kind of, again, think about that's where you teach the kids to think critically. Let's look at what it means long-term. And so I would do the research, look at all the branches, look at Coast Guard, look at Army, look at Navy, look at Air Force, excuse me, look at Space Force, look at Marines, and see what they have to offer. And think about the things you want to do. To your point, find that skill. If you want to be a mechanic, you know what? Maybe you go in and you become a mechanic for the Army, and you're working on Jeeps. But when you get out, now you've got years of experience working on any number of machines. All of those things. So I think that is, don't look at it as I'm going into the military to become a soldier. I'm going in to serve my country, and I'm going to get a whole host of skills that I can take somewhere else. And it's not a lifelong decision. You're not making a commitment to make this your career for life. Some people get in, they're in for 20 or 30 years and they love it. Some people in the academy, we call it 5 and dive. They do their 5 years and they bail out. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. It's whatever you make it out to be. So I would say do the research and find out what the best opportunity is for you to do the thing you want to do. Then compare it to going a more civilian route and see which one you think stacks up.
I think that's a solid response. Do your research. I've told my son plenty of times, like, do your research on anything that you want to do so you can have a well-rounded response for what you plan on doing. If you want to go into trade school, what does this look like 5-10 years down the line? Do you want to start your own business behind it? Or do you want to work for somebody else? What is it going to mean? Are you going to go commercial? Are you going to do residential? Like, what does that look like for you 5 to 10 years down the line? And, oddly enough, he couldn't answer any of my questions. He didn't do any other research. He just decided, I'm going to do it, and I'm going to see what happens. And I'm just like, you can't go about life that way. You have to be able to sit down, think critically, and make sure that this is something that's right for you and you want to do it for the long haul, because you get to a point where you don't want to do it and you may want to change your career.
Right. Sure. I mean, I think about, I worked in a machine shop as a kid, and I think about, so I was working with a lot of people who had done these jobs for a long time. And if you're going to go into like plumbing, for example, or you're going to be a roofer, or you're going to be a contractor, that all sounds well and good. But when you're 40 years old, hauling the thing of shingles over your shoulder up on a rooftop, not quite as easy as when you're 20 years old, right?
Exactly.
And I think, again, I had a boss who once said, hope is not a strategy. So, if your kid is saying, hey, I'm going to do this, see how it turns out, that's hope. And hope is fine, but you have to have a plan behind it. So again, I think you're 100% right. And the thing is, all of that information is at your fingertips. Yes. Right? I mean, go to Google or go to ChatGPT and type in, like, I'm considering becoming a X. What does that mean? I did that for my son when he got to shore duty. Then I said, just describe for me a typical week in the life of a NUPOC recruiter in the Navy, and it gave me literally a day-by-day thing. Like, typically you'll be doing this, that, and the other thing, and you'll be traveling to schools here and such and such and so on. So I'm like, well, okay, at least I have a basis to start the conversation with now. So I think this goes back to the patience thing, being patient enough to do the research and really think about, the benefits and again, and understanding the negatives, because there is no the only job I think I'd really want that I could say I feel is close to perfect would be to win the Powerball. That is as good as it gets, right? But everything else is a job.
It is. It
You're
is.
you're going to have a boss, and even if you're working for yourself, your clients are your bosses. So guess what? Someone's going to be telling you what to do. Get used to it. You're never going to get paid as much as you think you're worth. I mean, when you have guys in the NBA saying $250 million isn't enough, that tells you that there's just never enough money. So I think it's so important that we kind of start to say, let's be honest. Here's the positives. Here's the potential drawbacks, and then you can make an informed decision. Yeah, so I think that's just, again, I think that's so critical, and I think if more people did that, more kids from, let's say, 16 to 20 did that, I think more of them would say, geez, this military thing it's a pretty good gig. And when you look out 5-10 years, you might be in your 30s and go, I'm glad I did that. I really put my kids know now they've got their finances in order, and they know they're going to be in good financial footing, if and when they leave the military, because they've used that head start that the academies gave them. Look, this is something a lot of people know. When you're at one of our military academies, after your first 2 years, you can leave your first 2 years without penalty. After that, you have to start paying back. But once you sign your 2-for-7s, which means I've signed on, I'm going to complete not only my 4 years at the academy, but my minimum of 5 to 7 years commitment and active service, they give you a loan. And it's in the Navy, it's called the ACE Starter Loan. And I want to say it was $37,000. And the interest rate was 0.5%. That's a head start.
Right.
You're not going to get that if you go to Michigan State up the road from both of us, right? They're not going to say, hey, sure, here's a big chunk of money. Don't worry about paying it back for a couple of years. We're not going to charge you interest. No, you're going to go to the federal government, take out a huge student loan, and start paying that back right away. So that's one of those little benefits, that you start to paint that whole picture. And go, wow, I didn't realize that that's a thing. My son graduated in 2020 from the Naval Academy. So his class, the kids who went surface, the kids who went subs, and it's kind of some of the other non-pilot lines are coming up, or their contracts are going to be coming up soon. So they're starting to debate, what am I going to sign back on? Well, some of them are getting offered some pretty significant bonuses to sign back on, to the tune of like more than I've ever made in a single year, just to sign the contract. So like my daughter, I just spent the weekend with my kids out in Colorado. My daughter's like thinking, she's starting to do the math. Okay, if I got that much money and she's the money person in our house. They start to figure that out. Like, yeah, is that the best thing I'd want to do the most? No, but again, all things being equal, maybe I would consider doing that. So I think that research part of it, I can't overstate that. Take all of that into consideration. What the job entails, what it's going to pay, what's the long-term benefit, all of that. I think a lot more people would land on it, I think, if they did that.
I agree. So looking at all of that in the next steps, for your future plans or your blog and other initiatives related to military parenting, like what are your plans for the blog? Are you going to continue to blog?
Yeah.
Are you going to create other initiatives related to military parenting?
Yeah. So I just released a book, Flying High, Diving Deep, which kind of takes everything in the blog and takes it to another level. So I felt that was the next natural step, right, to kind of take that next level. I've done a lot of podcasts about life as a military academy parent with some of the Navy authors in particular. So the blog will continue at least until my daughter gets out of the academy. So at least it's through next year. And I'm still writing on both blogs. Okay. And I think that's a good question. That's something I've been noodling on. What happens next? Because I don't know if I have another book in me. I think I'll write a second edition to this book, because I think I want to layer on top some of the things I couldn't write about. Like I want to write about in more depth my son's experience with his job selection, which he didn't get what he wanted. And I think I can do that after he's out. And I want to talk a little bit more about some of the things he experienced as an officer, this little incident in Norway, and some of the things that happened that he can't talk about all of it because some of it's classified, of course. So I think that's a natural thing. But I think I will stay active as a military academy parent, especially on Facebook, because I think that is a good way to meet parents where they are. And once they know who I am, they can feel comfortable reaching out to me. So I can't tell you I have a rock solid plan on what's next. There's a lot of this. I mean, this all just kind of happened. I started writing the blog. I wrote my first book about the Naval Academy. I started the Air Force Academy blog. The book kind of happened. I met these other authors. We've done podcasts together. I've had other people. We've talked to these kind of conversations. So, I don't want to say I don't have a plan, but I don't have a plan. And so far, it's worked out okay. So I'm just going to kind of keep doing what I'm doing. And I would say this: as long as I feel like I'm doing something useful and helpful for the community, I'll continue to be a part of it.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, Karl, thank you for coming onto the show. Thank you for expressing and allowing my audience to be a part of your kid's journey for the most part. And you're just telling us these riveting stories and these riveting experiences. I'm pretty sure a lot of them didn't even know of all the major benefits that came from just being a military parent and just going to the military in general. So now they have new information to go
Yeah.
on to go and tell their kids about it. So for my audience, from me, we would definitely appreciate you coming out here. Hey, farewell fans. Hey, come make sure y'all come back for another one-on-one interview. Hey, we'll see you on the next one. Peace.
Thanks.